In the quiet town of Perry, Florida, a series of unthinkable deaths would soon raise questions that no one could answer. Over the course of just a few years, 5 children and 1 elderly man lost their lives under the care of a seemingly trustworthy babysitter. But the truth would shatter any illusions of innocence. This is the disturbing case of Christine Falling, the babysitter from hell. Welcome to Murder Files, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of true crime. In today's episode, we uncover the shocking story of Christine Falling, a woman who turned the lives of those around her into a deadly game of control and murder. Stay tuned and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a chilling tale from the world of true crime. Christine Laverne Slaughter was born on March 12, 1963, in Perry, Florida, to an unstable and fractured family. Her father, Thomas, was 65 years old when she was born, and her mother, Anne, was only 16. Christine's early life was far from typical, as her parents were ill-equipped to provide the stability and care a young child needs. Poverty and neglect marked her childhood, and she would spend much of her early years in and out of orphanages. Despite these challenges, Christine's story would only get darker. From the start, there were signs that something was not right. By the time she was a teenager, she had already experienced a failed marriage at the age of 14. Her first husband, 20 years her senior, left her after just 6 weeks. This failed union would mark the beginning of Christine's troubled adult life, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. As Christine entered her late teens, she was diagnosed with epilepsy and considered mentally challenged. She was never able to fully integrate into a normal school system, often experiencing hallucinations and bouts of confusion. Her behavior became increasingly erratic, and her lack of control over her impulses only deepened. By the time she was 16, she was deemed incapacitated under medical advice and could no longer manage a regular life without assistance. Christine was in and out of hospitals during these years, frequently seeking treatment for her health issues, including irregular menstrual cycles and mental instability. Despite these challenges, she found ways to earn money by babysitting for neighbors and friends in her local area. But what seemed like a way for Christine to earn some income was in fact the beginning of a terrifying pattern. In 1980, she began working as a babysitter, taking care of children in the community while their parents were away. Her references seemed solid enough, and her reputation was that of an ordinary young woman trying to make a living. Little did anyone know, Christine's babysitting gigs would become her dark stage for unspeakable acts. What appeared to be the harmless job of watching children would soon spiral into a nightmare no one could have anticipated. As Christine settled into her role as a trusted caregiver, it wasn't long before her dark urges began to surface. But at this point, no one suspected that this seemingly ordinary young woman was capable of something far more sinister. It was a cold February day in 1980 when Christine received her first babysitting job in Blountstown, Florida. The parents of 2-year-old Cassidy Johnson had no reason to suspect that their child would not return home. They had asked Christine to care for Cassidy, believing she was a responsible young woman capable of handling the task. The following day, Cassidy was taken to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed her with encephalitis, a brain infection that was often fatal in young children. Within days, Cassidy was dead. Her parents were devastated. The cause of death, encephalitis, seemed clear at the time, and no one thought to question the circumstances surrounding the child's sudden illness. However, as time passed, doubts began to arise. An autopsy revealed something shocking. The child's skull bore signs of blunt force trauma. The family was informed that Cassidy's cause of death wasn't solely attributed to encephalitis. Something else had happened, something darker. The police took notice of the discrepancies. Could it be that Cassidy's death was not simply a tragic medical condition? Could Christine have been involved? A doctor had even recommended investigating the matter further, suggesting that there may have been foul play. But in an unfortunate twist of fate, the recommendation was lost in a bureaucratic shuffle, and the case was eventually closed without further inquiry. Christine, however, remained unfazed. She spoke about Cassidy's death in the same detached manner as she did everything else. She claimed that the child had fallen from her crib and passed out. Despite the inconsistencies in her story, no one questioned her. No one could have suspected the truth, that a young woman who had once been a troubled teenager struggling with emotional instability was now hiding a terrifying secret. The case was ruled as an unfortunate accident, and Christine was free to move on. But her next job, just months later, would set the stage for a pattern of death that would soon spiral out of control. It was clear now, Christine Falling was no ordinary babysitter. But no one could yet fathom the horrors she would unleash. She was just getting started. By the time the summer of 1980 arrived, Christine had moved on from her first tragic babysitting job and was living in Lakeland, Florida. She had worked as a babysitter before, but this time she took on a heavier responsibility, looking after more children from local families. Her reputation was untainted, and her quiet demeanor made her an ideal caregiver in the eyes of the parents who hired her. Yet again, tragedy would strike. In early summer, Christine was hired to babysit 4-year-old Jeffrey Davis. He was a happy, energetic child, but his life would be tragically cut short while under Christine's watch. Just a few days later, Jeffrey was dead. The official cause of death was myocarditis, a rare but serious heart condition. The doctors explained that it could happen suddenly and without warning, even in a child as young as Jeffrey. A few days after Jeffrey's death, tragedy struck again. This time, it was 2-year-old Joseph Spring, another child who had been in Christine's care while she was babysitting Jeffrey. He was diagnosed with a viral infection and passed away shortly thereafter. His parents, devastated by the loss of their child, couldn't understand how both of their sons could die so unexpectedly. The same babysitter had been watching them. Though doctors believed the viral infection was responsible for Joseph's death, the connection between the deaths of both children raised alarm bells. No one could explain the coincidence of 2 children dying within such a short span of time while under Christine's care. The eerie similarities between the deaths made those closest to the situation uneasy. Christine, however, remained calm. She offered no explanation for the sudden deaths of the 2 children she had cared for. She did not express the remorse one would expect from someone who had witnessed such devastating losses. In fact, she seemed unaffected, as though this tragedy was just another part of life. Her response to the situation was chillingly indifferent. As word of the deaths spread, whispers of suspicion began to grow. Was this truly a case of bad luck? Was it a series of unfortunate coincidences, or was something far more sinister at play? But despite the mounting questions, no one had concrete evidence to connect Christine to the deaths. As the investigation faltered, Christine moved on once again, continuing her work as a trusted babysitter. But the pattern had already begun, and as each death seemed to echo the last, it became clear that something much darker was taking root. Christine Falling's life seemed to continue without interruption. She had grown accustomed to the quiet towns she moved through, working as a caregiver, always leaving behind a trail of destruction, but never once drawing attention to herself. In 1981, she found herself back in her hometown of Perry, Florida, where she began working as a nursing assistant. It seemed like a fresh start for Christine as she took on a new role caring for elderly patients. Her work at a local nursing home brought her in contact with more vulnerable individuals, some of whom were too frail to fend for themselves. But it also gave Christine the perfect opportunity to strike once again. On the same day she started working for 77-year-old William Swindle, the elderly man was found unresponsive in his kitchen. He had been in good health prior to this, and his family had no reason to believe anything was amiss. He had been living alone, but had hired Christine to assist with daily tasks and provide companionship during his later years. When William collapsed, he was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead soon after arrival. The official cause of death was not immediately suspected to be foul play, and William's family was left to grieve the unexpected loss. Yet there were whispers among the staff who had worked with Christine. Some of them had found it odd that William's health had seemed to decline so rapidly after Christine arrived on the scene. The investigation into his death was inconclusive. His sudden passing was officially ruled as natural causes, and nothing more was done. But there were disturbing details that began to emerge. William had been in relatively good health before Christine's arrival, and no one could fully explain why his condition had deteriorated so quickly. Still, as was the case with her previous victims, Christine was not under suspicion. It seemed that every time Christine moved to a new town, tragedy followed. She was once again allowed to slip through the cracks, and no one connected her to the death of William Swindle. Yet, it would not be long before her pattern would once again repeat itself. Christine had already set her sights on new victims. As the deaths continued, no one could yet piece together the disturbing reality that she was the one linking them all. As 1981 progressed, Christine's pattern of deadly encounters continued, with each new tragedy building upon the last. She had left a trail of unanswered questions and devastated families in her wake, but she remained under the radar, seemingly untouchable. It wasn't until the fall of 1981 that the darkness Christine harbored would strike once more, this time with a victim who would be too close to home. In late 1981, Christine began working as a caregiver for her own half-sister, whose baby daughter, 8-month-old Jennifer Daniels, would become her next victim. The circumstances surrounding Jennifer's death would mirror the eerie pattern Christine had established in previous years. Jennifer's parents trusted Christine, believing she would take good care of their baby while they were away. But tragedy struck just hours later. Jennifer stopped breathing while left alone in the car, an event that shocked the family. The official cause of death was later deemed to be sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, an explanation that often arises when no other cause of death can be pinpointed. However, the family couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The timing was just too perfect. Christine had been alone with Jennifer for a short period of time before the baby's sudden death. It was a tragic coincidence, but at the time, no one could connect the dots. Christine's cold and emotionless demeanor raised even more suspicion. She did not seem devastated by the loss of her own niece. Instead, she remained eerily calm, offering no explanation and displaying no sorrow or remorse. Her behavior was chillingly detached, as though the death of Jennifer Daniels was no more significant than any of the previous ones. Doctors ruled out foul play and dismissed the possibility of a connection to Christine's past. After all, SIDS was a common diagnosis for sudden infant deaths, and there was no obvious evidence that Christine had anything to do with Jennifer's passing. But the whispers had started. Family members, friends, and those who had worked with Christine couldn't ignore the growing unease. Was this simply a tragic coincidence, or was Christine once again involved in another unexplained death? Despite the growing suspicions, no one had definitive proof, and Christine moved on, her dark pattern continuing unchecked. The pattern of deaths she had so carefully concealed had now claimed another life, but once again no one could connect the pieces. As the investigation into Jennifer's death stalled, Christine's web of deception tightened. She would soon find her next victim. It wasn't until the summer of 1982 that the unthinkable happened. Christine, now deeply embedded in her twisted pattern of death, would soon face a turning point, one that would unravel everything she had so carefully hidden. The victim this time was 10-week-old Travis Coleman, a baby whose life would be tragically cut short while in Christine's care. This time, the circumstances were different. There would be no excuse for the tragedy that followed. Travis had been left in Christine's hands while his parents took care of errands. In the few hours they were gone, a horrific crime took place. Travis was found dead, and an autopsy revealed something shocking: internal injuries consistent with suffocation. For the first time, the investigation focused on Christine. It was clear now that this was not an accidental death. This was the result of deliberate, calculated actions. As the evidence mounted, Christine's behavior became more erratic. The doctors, who had initially been quick to dismiss her previous actions, now had no choice but to confront the grim reality. This was no isolated incident. Christine's past, the trail of deaths she had left behind, could no longer be ignored. The pattern was unmistakable.
When police questioned Christine about Travis's death, she cracked. For the first time, she admitted to her crimes. She confessed that she had been hearing voices that told her to kill the babies in her care. She revealed how she had suffocated her victims with pillows, blankets, and her bare hands. Her confession was chilling in its detachment, as though the horrific acts were mere steps in an ongoing, inevitable cycle. Christine claimed that the voices were compelling her to commit these acts, that she had no control over her actions. She said that she felt like she was following orders, unable to stop herself. The confession was unsettling, but it did little to explain why someone who seemed so ordinary, so seemingly trustworthy, could commit such monstrous acts. Her confession sent shockwaves through the small towns where she had lived and worked. The families of her victims, already devastated by their losses, were left reeling. The authorities now had the undeniable evidence they needed to link her to at least 3 murders: Cassidy Johnson, Jennifer Daniels, and now Travis Coleman. But Christine wasn't finished yet. As the investigation continued, more dark secrets began to surface. What had driven her to commit such atrocities? Was there more to her past than anyone had realized? The truth was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined, and Christine was just beginning to reveal the depths of her madness. The chilling details of Christine Falling's confessions sent shockwaves throughout the small communities she had once inhabited. As she admitted to the murders of Cassidy Johnson, Jennifer Daniels, and Travis Coleman, the investigation quickly intensified. Christine's nonchalant demeanor during her confession only added to the disturbing nature of her crimes. There was no sign of remorse in her words, no tears, no hesitation, just a cold, clinical recounting of each murder, as though they were simply tasks she had been compelled to complete. As police began to gather all the pieces of Christine's dark past, the full scope of her actions came into focus. It was revealed that while there had been suspicions surrounding the previous deaths of Jeffrey Davis, Joseph Spring, and William Swindle, there had been no conclusive evidence to connect Christine to their deaths. But now, with her confession and the evidence in hand, Christine was finally facing the consequences of her actions. In December of 1982, Christine Falling pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Despite the severity of her crimes, the death penalty was not on the table for Christine. Her defense attorneys argued that she had been mentally unstable at the time of the murders, a claim that ultimately spared her life. She was sent to the Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida, where she would begin serving her sentence. Christine's case, though resolved legally, left the public reeling. People couldn't understand how someone who seemed so ordinary, so seemingly trustworthy, could commit such monstrous acts. Her claim of hearing voices was unsettling, but it didn't fully explain the motives behind her killings. The families of Christine's victims, forever scarred by the deaths of their loved ones, were left to pick up the pieces. They could never truly heal from the loss of their children and loved ones, but they were granted some solace in the fact that Christine was behind bars, where she could do no more harm. In 2017, Christine attempted to gain parole, but her request was denied. She remains in prison, still a mystery to those who study her case. She continues to be a subject of both fascination and fear, as experts try to understand the psychology of a woman who became one of the most chilling female killers in Florida's history.
Christine Falling's case left a trail of devastation that never fully healed for the families of her victims. For them, no amount of justice could ever replace the lives she took. Cassidy, Jennifer, and Travis. Their grief became an ongoing burden that shaped their lives forever. Christine's name became synonymous with terror, not just in Florida, but nationwide. Her story raised uncomfortable questions about the safety of children in the care of trusted individuals. How could someone who seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable, be capable of such horrors? Christine's case highlighted the danger of assuming that the people closest to us are always safe. The public's fascination with Christine only deepened over time. Her lack of remorse and chilling claims about hearing voices made her a figure of both fear and intrigue. Despite a parole hearing in 2017, Christine remains behind bars, and her parole request for 2024 is unlikely to succeed. For the families of her victims, the pain never truly goes away. Christine's crimes serve as a reminder that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades. Her story is a tragic warning of how trust can be violated, and the aftermath of such betrayal is something that no amount of justice can erase. If this story left you shaken, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime cases that uncover the darkness hiding behind seemingly ordinary lives. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below with your reactions or any cases you'd like us to cover next. Stay vigilant, stay aware, and remember, the truth is often darker than we imagine.